Practicing makes us less imperfect. You hear this term, practice makes perfect? Bullshit. There's no such thing as perfection. So practice does not make perfect. Practice makes less imperfection. That's it. You're never going to achieve 100% perfection. Practice doesn't make perfect. Practice reduces the imperfection to a certain degree. Practicing shadow work is the only way to become better at doing it. This is a practice that you repeatedly engage in over time, habitually. This does not mean that we should ever expect perfection. Perfection is a mental construct that will often interfere with self-improvement because people tend to focus on trying to make something perfect instead of making it better than it was previously. This dynamic will even lead some people to abandon self-improvement before they even begin because they are holding too lofty of an ideal in their mind. This is what religion does. It paints too lofty of a picture, and then people don't want to engage in the work of self-betterment because they feel they could never live up to that perfect ideal that has been set for them. It discourages them from making decent, real-world, yet imperfect improvements to themselves. Strive to get something accomplished, but don't worry about making it perfect. You're never going to make anything perfect. There's no such thing in the physical world. Instead, focus on making some dynamic in your life better than it previously was through practice. Habituating small changes over time is practice. That's what makes us less imperfect. Part 3 and final part, integration and progress. Integration is the first step to integrity. They're based on the same root, integral. To integrate means to bring together, to combine, or to incorporate into a state of wholeness. And that's what we're trying to do through shadow work. The whole long-term process and practice of shadow work is to achieve the integration of personal improvements and good habits into our personality, to form a better and more complete human being. Without such integration as a result of shadow work, a human being remains lacking in true integrity. They are fragmented. They are segmented. And as a result, their long-term goals go unfulfilled, and all of human society remains unimproved, because the extent to which individuals improve is the extent to which all of the human species and our civilization improves. Only correct integration of self-improvements and good habits create true integrity within an individual and eventually lead to the personal fulfillment and manifestation of important life and societal goals. Defining personal shadow work progress. Shadow work progress should be defined and measured, not just left to chance or loose interpretation. It needs to be defined and measured, your progress in self-improvement. If you aren't moving closer to changing for the better, meeting personal requirements for positive change, or achieving truly important life goals, then your progress and efforts are obviously falling short. The key to true progress is always small, habituated, incremental changes that become large life habit changes over time. That's why I call them incremental changes. You're making those small changes over time, and then you're turning them into habits. That's when big life changes start to manifest. You have to habituate them. You have to stick with it. You have to have tenacity. You have to have relentlessness. Never say die attitude. And instead of competing with anyone else, look at yourself from yesterday as your only competitor. You are only trying to improve who you were previously. Define your goals clearly and then work hard to make incremental improvements toward those goals. The only person that you should compete with in these endeavors is the person who you were yesterday. That's it. You don't need to compete with anybody else. So, if you look at improvement over time and you graph it, okay, as time moves forward, Improvement should be going up. This is an acceptable improvement rate. If we're going to track improvement rate over time, this is a highly acceptable improvement rate. It doesn't have to be like this straight up, all the way up like this at that kind of a steep angle. It needs to be an incremental progression forward over time. Okay? That's an acceptable improvement rate over time, that chart. Here's another acceptable improvement rate over time. We can reduce it like that. It's still going up less quickly. It's more slow improvement over time, but that is also an acceptable improvement rate over time. I would not beat down, demean, or berate anybody who's making an improvement rate on that, a slope like that. If we charted their improvement rate, I'd congratulate them. This is what people don't understand about what I'm talking about. I just need improvement over time, not stagnation. Here's what's completely unacceptable. This next chart, 100% unacceptable. If you're staying the same and you're not improving and things don't get better over time in your progress, you're not doing shadow work correctly, and that's completely unacceptable when you're charting your progress. And certainly dipping is unacceptable. I mean, that doesn't need to be said. Okay? But staying stagnant is not an acceptable improvement rate over time. And many people do this in their life endeavors. They don't improve over time because they're not habituating good habits. Be completely honest with yourself when tracking progress. When tracking your progress over time, you got to come full circle to the first principles of stop lying to yourself. Be completely honest with yourself. Shadow work begins and ends with honesty, and its progress only continues with honesty. So never ever lie to yourself about your progress. You have to be honest about your progress. If you are not progressing at the rate you feel you should, tell yourself the truth about that and then do something about it. Everyone has bad days and slips from time to time. That doesn't mean you give up. That doesn't mean you beat yourself up. But if your long-term progress is flatlining, that is not acceptable. And you must reevaluate your thoughts and your behaviors in order to do better without making excuses or backtracking. You don't make excuses for why you didn't do as well as you want to. You just improve upon your methods. That might mean going back, being even more brutally honest with yourself, actually understanding more causal factors, and formulating better action plans. I've just given you a few examples here. There's billions of ways to apply this. Set the bar high for progress, not low. Setting the bar low doesn't help you or anybody else. You've got to set the bar high. Try to be an actual achiever in these endeavors. There is very little point to setting goals in shadow work if you do not set the bar high or put enough weight on the barbell, as the popular sayings go. Improvement and self-actualization are never manifested in one's comfort zone, ever. You have to leave the comfort zone to make these stated improvements. You must genuinely challenge yourself in order to realize long-term goals. It is important to note that a balance point must also be struck when it comes to this dynamic, because you also do not wish to overwhelm yourself or set completely unrealistic standards either. So you don't set the bar to the moon, but you set the bar high enough that you're challenging yourself. Okay? So you have to know your limitations. Part of progressing in a healthy way in shadow work is to learn enough about yourself so that you understand your true potential and you set the bar high enough to challenge yourself to rise to that real world achievable potential, and then put the necessary work in to reach that potential. But it is not setting the bar so high that you're setting an unrealistic standard for yourself. Okay? So that balance has to be understood and struck. Another way of tracking the progress of shadow work is, are you actively dissolving false mental constructs? In other words, are you breaking the head cage of religious beliefs? And I don't just mean cultural religions. I mean false ideologies like authority and the worship of money and total ego identity and just living for comfort and pleasure. These are religions. Tracking your shadow work progress means asking yourself more difficult questions, like you asked in the first stage of shadow work. Well, to accurately track the progress, you got to ask even more difficult questions. One of the first is, How have I done regarding changing my worldview and my overall mindset toward the truth? Have you dissolved the false mental constructs that previously held back your consciousness? Have you truly made progress in that regard? Or have you doubled down and remained stubborn? Have you abandoned nonsensical and erroneous belief systems such as religion, authority, government, the worship of money, materialism, selfishness, a poisoned worldview of human nature, and on and on and on? Have you abandoned those absolutely false mental constructs? And you got to ask yourself if you have, and that's how you can chart your progress. It's one way. If false mental constructs are being dissolved and your mind is expanding into a deep understanding of natural law and a desire to teach it to others, then acceptable progress is being made in your shadow work endeavors, at least in that capacity, which is the most important one. Another thing you have to ask yourself is, are you dissolving ego identification? Consider how much you still remain identified with societal constructs of self. And use that as another important measure of shadow work progress. How much have you dissolved ego identification? Do you still see yourself as just some worker, or just a spouse, or somebody's family member, or a member of a nation, a religion, a race, or some other group? These are all just ego identified roles. Or have you come to see your own sense of selfhood as having been tremendously expanded in scope by doing the shadow work? As a being within your own being? And do you see yourself as an aspect of infinite consciousness, which has something tremendously important to contribute to this planet in a time of incredible cosmic moral crisis? Have you come to see yourself in that expanded dynamic of consciousness? If you make it to this stage of shadow work, and you are honest about examining your own consciousness in this way, the honest answer is actually quite plain to see, and you'll easily know what your continued work is to do. Because if you're still totally ego identified as little me, I'm just this worker, I'm just somebody who does this job, I'm just a member of some race, religion, nationality, family member, etc., you're not expanding your worldview into the understanding that you are an absolutely infinitely valuable expression of individuated consciousness existing within the totality of universal consciousness. And if you're not getting there, you're not making progress in shadow work. How initiated have you become? How much have you begun true self-actualization and true work to improve the self? This is what the initiatory traditions in the occult world were ultimately all about throughout all of human history. Another great measure of progress in shadow work is simply to go back to the maxims of occult initiation and ask yourself from a perspective of complete honesty how well you are truly embodying those maxims. Ask yourself questions like, have I stopped lying to myself? And we're taking this full circle. Have I stopped engaging in cognitive dissonance and dreaming? Have I truly learned how to think through the trivium methodology of truth discovery? Am I truly living in the present moment and showing up fully present for the tasks that I perform on a daily basis? Have I cared for and activated my physical body? How about have we actually cared enough to continue with self-improvement and continue to trying to teach objective morality to the masses of human beings? These are the true riddles of the Sphinx. Answer them honestly, and your initiation and progress will be revealed unto you. True health is a great measure of success in shadow work, and I don't just mean physical health. One of the best measuring sticks for true success when it comes to shadow work is health, true health. How overall holistically healthy you are. If you ask yourself how healthy you are in any particular aspect of your life, whether it be physical health, mental health, emotional health, spiritual health, then gauge that measure of health from an honest perspective. You will know whether your shadow work efforts have succeeded or not over time. And this is part of never, ever normalize pathology, especially mental dishealth. Mental illness should never be normalized. Part of shadow work is improving mental health. It's improving physical health, mental health, emotional health, and spiritual health. So, True health is a measure of how accurately we are aligning ourselves to nature's laws and its underlying dynamic intelligence. If we do that, there's no stopping us. If we refuse to engage in that process, nothing can help us. If you are stuck along the path, do not be afraid to ask for help. You do not need to remain an island. There should never be any shame or embarrassment if you need to ask for help or assistance in these endeavors, or to reach out to others through some type of a system of support in order to help you on your personal journey in shadow work. If you feel comfortable, you can talk to people about that. You can even form support groups regarding that. No one is an island unto themselves in any dynamic, in any aspect. And it is okay to acknowledge personal limitations and ask others with more knowledge and experience for their input and expertise. The end goal of shadow work, after all, is not just individual betterment, but the betterment of our entire communities and ultimately our species and our world as a whole. So this is a group dynamic and a group endeavor. It is not just for the individual. That needs to be very clearly understood. Continue the process of shadow work with more self-directed learning. Never disengage the pursuit of knowledge. Knowledge is always a good thing. To progress further with your shadow work journey and endeavors, one must become an autodidact, a self-directed learner. To be an autodidact means that you go out in search of knowledge without waiting for orders or permission from anyone else. You just go and you seek out and you receive that knowledge. You put that knowledge into yourself by an act of your own will. We live in an age of unbelievable abundance of knowledge and information. Avail yourself of it if you want your shadow work journey to continue forward and yield positive results. Learn how to mine the digital gold that lurks on the internet because it's everywhere. I teach these methods in how to become the true media. It is literally at our fingertips if we want it. Perfection, the very idea that perfection could ever be achieved is an enemy that does not exist in reality. It's an illusory enemy. And it will thwart your progress in shadow work. Perfection is the enemy of progress, and it is the enemy of true goodness. An enemy of true goodness. Perfection is the enemy of good and progress. There is no such thing as perfection in the 3D physical world. The very idea, the mental construct of perfection. It is a mental construct that will often prevent people from doing something that is truly good or making a good effort and making good improvement in their lives. A very difficult thing for some people to accept when it comes to shadow work is there is no such thing as perfect healing. There is no such thing as perfect improvement. There is no such thing as perfect healing of trauma. There is no such thing as perfect progress. Get these notions out of your mind. They are going to be detriments and anchors that will hold you back. There is only better than it was before. There is no such thing as perfect. There is only such a thing as it's now better than it was before. One should never expect something to be completely perfect or wait to get something perfect to act upon it. Create something that is in your life that is good, that is a form of improvement, and then continue to improve upon that as you go. That's your journey. That's your work. This is the best practice when it comes to progress and your measure for progress. Personal growth is about progress, not perfection. Amen. Another wonderful prayer there. Okay? These are concepts that we must grok in the shadow work endeavor. Failure in any endeavor in life is a teacher that can show us what not to do. We should not be afraid of failure. Failure can be our best teacher, but fear of failure can be our worst enemy. You can't be afraid to fail. There's no risk without reward. You have to take risks to make true improvements. One of the biggest factors which mentally hinders personal growth and improvement is the fear of failure. people have fear deeply embedded within their psyche of failing at whatever endeavor they try. So then what they do is they don't bother to try. The fear of failing at a life endeavor, I wrote live there, I'll fix it, at a life endeavor often makes us unwilling to even try to accomplish it. Progress in shadow work means shedding your personal fear of failure to the extent that you at least activate and try your hardest. There is no gain without hard effort, and there is no gain without the risk of failure. Failure is not the end of the world, and it's not the end of the work. In fact, failure can often be one of the greatest teachers in our lives, as failure will show us what not to do. We can then learn from that harsh lesson and modify our methods and approach in ways that refine our chances of improvement and success. And we'll do that when we fail. Giving up on yourself is never, ever, ever an option. It has been said that quitters never win and winners never quit. Amen. Truer words never spoken. This is both completely true and highly relevant when it comes to true shadow work as an ongoing process. You must take on a tenacious, never say die attitude and never, ever give up. Least of all on yourself. If you fail, you pick yourself up and you keep moving forward. You can ask for help and assistance if and when you require it. And there is no shame whatsoever in that. But never stop. Never give up on yourself. Never give up on your progress toward personal betterment. This occult symbol, sigil if you will, it says labore et constantia, which means in Latin, work and constant effort. That is what is required for shadow work. Shadow work is an ongoing labor of love, both self-love and self-respect, and self-love and agape love. These are critical aspects of the shadow work equation. Shadow work, like any other worthy endeavor in human life, requires constant, ongoing effort to be successful in the long run. So giving up and quitting is never an option. Labore et constantia. It's work and constancy, constant effort. And it's a never-ending process, ladies and gentlemen. I would be remiss if I didn't touch on the concepts within shadow work of the dynamics of forgiving and letting go, because let's face it, if you're doing shadow work, you're engaging in looking at traumas, and traumas are often conducted by others. So a crucial part of one's shadow work journey is the development of the understanding of the difference between forgiveness and letting go, and when to employ each modality of behavior. Because we shouldn't forgive everything, and maybe even we shouldn't let certain things go. But we should know when to forgive and we should know when to let go. Working through trauma is a significant component of shadow work. So the issue of forgiveness will definitely present itself. True forgiveness can only occur if those who conducted the wrongdoing upon you and traumatized you are truly remorseful, have made amends with those who were injured, and have committed to cease further harmful behavior. With these basic characteristics, you have a form of true forgiveness. And true forgiveness is correctly understood with these characteristics as a two-way dynamic between the initiator of harm and the injured party. And the initiator of harm is remorseful and is making amends for the damage that they have caused. That's true forgiveness. When the initiator of harm does not fulfill the requirements for true forgiveness, which were previously outlined in the last slide, the best case scenario that can occur is letting go by the injured party. Letting go means that you are no longer going to carry feelings of resentment, malice, or hate toward the initiator of harm or the traumatic experience itself. This allows emotional wounds to heal for the injured party and for them to move on in a healthy capacity. Even if forgiveness was not engaged, you can still let go of all the resentment and malice and hate, okay? So that you can heal. It should be noted that forgiveness toward oneself for past mistakes and transgressions should also be practiced in the shadow work progress. So we not only need to learn when we should forgive others, we need to learn when we should forgive ourselves. Endlessly carrying resentment toward others or self-resentment for our own transgressions is just as unhealthy as it is. So endlessly carrying self-resentment is just as unhealthy as it is to endlessly carry resentment toward another who injured you. They're just as harmful to the self. With progress in shadow work, one will learn when to forgive and when to let go. Conscious parenting means passing on self-improvement that we have engaged in as adults. Among the greatest things one can ever do is to truly raise a child in a moral and conscious capacity. Conscious parenting could do more for the betterment of our species than perhaps anything else. Prospective parents should study and examine conscious parenting techniques, which you could even include as part of shadow work, from a multitude of sources, and incorporate these techniques into their own shadow work process. The self-improvement techniques employed throughout parents' life journey should then certainly be passed on to their children, so that a cycle of health and improvement can be established and further cultivated for the children. Conscious parenting is one of the greatest gifts that a child could ever be given. And for children who have had conscious parents, well, the thankfulness that you should be engaging for a gift like that is unmeasurable, is all I could say. And so few and far between have had that. It is this great work that truly will make us free. It may seem like an oxymoron to say that work is what will make us free, because human beings rarely equate work with freedom. Human beings certainly do not exist in this world to engage in trivial toil for basic survival and a meager paycheck. That is not the work to which I am referring. But when human beings make a sincere effort through shadow work to improve themselves, to awaken to truth, to embody what is truly right, and to truly engage in the one great work of joining the spiritual battle to end the slavery of humanity, true freedom indeed will be all of our reward. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much for your kind attention throughout the day today.